She was still chewing her ice cube when it happened. A lounge staffer in polished shoes and a too-polite voice leaned over her table and asked, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you sure you're in the right section? This area's for Platinum Tier members only." Around her, no one flinched. No one questioned. Because to them, the sight of a black woman alone in first-class seating, dressed like legacy wealth but too calm to be famous, didn't add up. And so they did what polished institutions do best. They smiled while they erased her. But here's what they didn't know. This wasn't the first time she was mistaken for less than. It would be the last. Because by the time they flagged her profile, she'd already flagged their funding. By the time they revoked her access, she was rewriting the access protocol. This isn't a story about a wrong seat. It's about what happens when power looks like someone you didn't expect, and she stops asking nicely. If you're still here, buckle in. The twist isn't that they humiliated her. The twist is she let them. Like what you're hearing. Hit subscribe for more stories that cut deeper than headlines. Tell us, which moment hit hardest, and where are you watching from? This is just the surface. The fallout? Unforgettable. Vanessa Reed stepped through the glass-paneled entryway of Dominion Air's Skylux Lounge with the practiced composure of someone who had spent a lifetime being underestimated. Her heels clicked softly against the polished marble floor, echoing beneath the ambient hum of modern jazz and the faint aroma of white tea diffusers lining the walls. She wore elegance like armor, tailored cream blazer, sand-toned slacks, understated luxury in every fold. The kind of outfit that didn't scream wealth, but whispered influence. Her Patek Philippe gleamed faintly as she checked the time. 7:44 a.m. Early, but not by accident. She liked to be ahead of schedule. Her private flight wouldn't depart for another 2 hours. But this wasn't just about catching a plane. It was about watching a system from the inside and taking notes. The receptionist at the front desk glanced up. She was young, maybe mid-20s, blonde hair slicked into a high corporate ponytail, Dominion Air pin perfectly centered. Vanessa smiled gently, offering her platinum black member card, extended slightly between two fingers. The card itself bore no expiration, because it wasn't meant to expire. It was issued only by executive request, tied to global net worth markers and discretionary access tiers. The receptionist didn't reach for the card. Her eyes hesitated just a breath too long, flicking from Vanessa's face to her blazer, down to her suitcase, minimal, leather, custom stamped, then back to her face again. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice lacquered with professional polish, but missing something essential underneath. "This lounge is reserved for Dominion Platinum and above." Vanessa held her gaze. "I know. That's why I'm here." She held the card a little higher. Vanessa Reed. It should already be on file. The receptionist blinked as if trying to make the name match the face in front of her. Then, without a word, she reached slowly for the card, inserted it into the terminal, and stared at the screen. "One moment," she muttered, but it wasn't really a request. It was a stalling tactic. A white man in a tech hoodie stepped up behind Vanessa, dragging a carry-on behind him and tapping his phone. "Name's Collins. First name Ethan. I think I left my watch charger here last week." The receptionist's face brightened immediately. "Of course, Mr. Collins. 1 second, I'll check the lost and found." Vanessa stood still, unmoving. The receptionist looked between them, clearly deciding to handle Ethan first. "Could you give me just a second?" she said to Vanessa, with the vague tone one might use for someone cutting in line. "I'll be right with you." "I was here first," Vanessa said evenly. There was no heat in her voice, just fact. But facts, as she knew too well, didn't always land the way they should. The receptionist hesitated, then said, "I'll just check this quickly. It'll only take a minute." Vanessa stepped back just slightly and watched. Ethan got his charger, a bottle of sparkling water, and a smile. It wasn't the weight that bothered her. It was the equation being done silently in the air. Who looked like they belonged, and who didn't. She'd seen this math before in boardrooms, investor calls, hotel lobbies. Sometimes it came as a double take, sometimes as a routine check. Always subtle, always deniable. When the receptionist returned, she inserted Vanessa's card again, this time with more visible effort. "Okay," she said carefully. "You're cleared. Sorry for the wait." Vanessa smiled thinly. "No problem." She rolled her suitcase forward through the biometric gate. Inside, the lounge opened up in 3 tiers. A central atrium with cloud-colored seating. To the left, a private dining space with glass partitions, and to the right, a work zone with high-back booths and soundproof walls. Every surface gleamed. Every patron looked polished, rested, wealthy. The kind of place where silence wasn't just respected, it was expected. She found a booth near the far end, away from the crowd, and unpacked her tablet. As it powered on, she heard a quiet murmur from behind. A hostess, speaking low but audible. "Is she media?" A man answered. "Don't think so. Might be a client rep. Marketing maybe?" Vanessa didn't turn, didn't respond. She just opened her tablet, pulled up the dashboard of Equinox Capital, and began reviewing quarterly reports. $6.4 billion in assets under management. Multiple active stakes in aviation logistics across 4 continents, including Dominion Air. She didn't need to be recognized. She just needed to observe. At 8:05, a server approached, polite but stiff. "Would you like something to drink?" "Still water with lemon," Vanessa replied. The woman nodded. "We're out of lemon." "Sorry." Vanessa glanced across the room where another guest had just received a tray with sliced lemons next to their tea set. "No problem," she said again. As the minutes ticked by, the quiet slights continued. The seat warmers in her booth didn't work. The app for ordering food said her profile was unauthorized for premium dining. When she asked about a Wi-Fi extender for encrypted uploads, the tech staff told her that feature was reserved for top-tier clients. She didn't raise her voice, didn't escalate. She just noted it all. Every delay, every invisible door, every time someone assumed she didn't have the right key. And still, she remained composed. Because this was only the first inning, and she never played without knowing how the game would end. Vanessa had just begun reviewing her cross-portfolio impact chart when a staff member approached her booth with a kind of practiced gentleness used only when trying not to provoke someone they've already decided is a problem. The woman wore the Dominion Air signature navy vest, her name tag slightly tilted, Maya Guest Experience Lead, and she offered a professional smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. "Hi there, MS. Reed," she said, voice soft. "I just wanted to check if you might prefer the lounge classic area. It's just across the corridor and a little less formal. Some guests find it more comfortable." Vanessa blinked once, slowly, her expression unreadable. "This section is fine," she said calmly, hands folded neatly over her tablet. "I've used this lounge before." Maya hesitated for half a beat, then nodded, though the suggestion hung between them like fog that hadn't quite lifted. "Of course," she said quickly. "Just let us know if you need anything." She turned and walked away without another word, but Vanessa could still feel the weight of the interaction clinging to the space she occupied. She went back to her screen, but her mind replayed the exchange. Less formal? More comfortable? The implication wasn't lost on her. They weren't offering her a perk. They were quietly trying to reassign her to a place where she wouldn't disturb the aesthetic they were curating here. It wasn't about comfort. It was about camouflage. And it wasn't the first time she'd seen this maneuver. Subtle repositioning. Soft exclusion. 10 minutes passed. Vanessa had almost moved on when a new staff member, this one male, tall, with the gait of someone who thought a vest counted as authority, appeared beside her booth. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, tone polite but edged with protocol. "We've had a concern from another guest about assigned seating in this area. Would you mind confirming your lounge access again?" Vanessa looked up, slowly closing her tablet. "I confirmed it at check-in." Her voice was still even, but a razor had begun to line the comm. The man glanced toward the front desk, as if passing the blame to invisible people behind invisible decisions. "Yes, of course. It's probably just a clerical mismatch. Happens sometimes when guests are upgraded across systems." He said the last word as if it explained everything. Vanessa reached into her leather bag, retrieved her card again, and handed it to him. "Scan it. You'll see I didn't get upgraded. I belong here." He took the card and moved to a nearby terminal, tapping quickly. A moment later, the screen blinked green. "Verified." He returned and handed it back, more hesitant this time. "Apologies. You're all set." Vanessa watched him walk away, his steps quicker now, less sure. Across the lounge, a woman in designer athleisure watched the entire scene unfold, sipping from a flute of orange mimosa. She didn't look away when Vanessa's eyes met hers. She just tilted her head, almost curious, as though wondering what Vanessa had done to trigger scrutiny. Vanessa exhaled slowly, gathering her thoughts. Something was shifting, not just the behavior of the staff, but the room's energy. That distinct current of people whispering without moving their mouths, glancing without turning their heads. The slow, deliberate exclusion that came not from shouting, but from silence. She remembered once, early in her career, being told by a fellow analyst that some rooms wouldn't say no to her. They'd just pretend she wasn't supposed to be there until she left on her own. She wasn't leaving. She adjusted her seat and opened her second report, Aviation Fuel Futures Tied to ESG Metrics in Emerging Markets, when a ping alerted her to an incoming message. Internal system notification. Scheduled maintenance may affect access to tier-specific services in select lounges. The timing was suspect. Vanessa tapped to refresh her food ordering app again, but the unauthorized profile error still flashed red. Across the room, a different staff member passed by offering fruit-infused water to two seated executives. He bypassed Vanessa's table entirely. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. This wasn't personal, not in the emotional sense. It was structural, conditioned, designed to make her question whether she'd made a mistake, whether her presence had somehow overstepped an invisible rulebook written in unspoken bias. But Vanessa Reed didn't question herself. She questioned systems. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a calendar alert. Investor briefing with Zurich office rescheduled 9:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. A reminder of what mattered. She reached into her bag and retrieved a small folder, printed copies of Dominion Air's capital pipeline proposals, many of which her fund had reviewed, commented on, and partially financed. The folder bore a small silver logo, Equinox Capital Discretionary Holdings. As she reviewed the notes, another staff member approached, this one younger, clearly new, holding a tablet and a stylus. "MS. Reed?" he asked nervously. "Our manager was wondering if you'd like to use one of the general use booths on the other side of the lounge. They're closer to the restrooms and have easier access to outlets." Vanessa didn't look up. "Do you ask that of all your Platinum Black members?" The young man paused, visibly unsure. "No, ma'am. I was just told." "Exactly," Vanessa said, looking up now. Her eyes didn't flare. They focused. "You were told. That's the problem." He swallowed and nodded, then retreated without further comment. Vanessa sat still, watching the shape of the room change around her. It wasn't anger she felt, it was data. The kind she didn't need to download or track through analytics software. It was behavioral, predictive, institutional. They weren't reacting to her status. They were reacting to her presence, her being. She pulled up the internal dashboard for Equinox's aviation investment arm. 10 terminals. 4 regional hubs. 1 heavily weighted partnership, Dominion Air. Her fingers hovered over the option tree. But she didn't act. Not yet. Because she was still watching. And they were still showing her exactly how their system worked. A few moments later, another subtle disruption would arrive in a different form, one even harder to rationalize, but not so easy to ignore. Vanessa adjusted the position of her tablet slightly and glanced toward the digital menu interface projected on the corner table panel, tapping into her profile through biometric verification. The screen greeted her with a brief flicker, "Welcome back, MS. Vanessa Reed," and offered her a list of available services tailored for Dominion Platinum Black members. She scrolled past the standard amenities until she reached the curated experience section, where the Imperial Tea Set stood out among the options. It was one of the few perks she consistently utilized. A tray of organic tea leaves flown in from Kyoto, presented with raw honey, ginger crisps, and a weighted glass teapot infused tableside. It wasn't about the luxury. It was about what it represented, a design that catered to preference and precision, much like the way she ran her firm. She tapped to confirm the order, received the expected order confirmed banner, and sat back to wait. 12 minutes passed, then 15. The tray didn't come. Others, who had ordered far later, had their beverages, even their meal trays. She spotted a neighboring guest being served caviar toast and a mango spritzer, smiling as a hostess bent politely to adjust their tray height. Vanessa's booth remained untouched. At minute 21, she rose from her seat and walked to the central counter, a long, minimalist bar of white stone and embedded lighting, where a few lounge staff stood organizing requests. "Excuse me," she said, tone crisp but polite. "I placed an order for the Imperial tea set. It was confirmed on my profile. Can someone check on the status?" One of the staff, a man in his early 30s with a laminated tag that read Operations Attendant Jared, turned and offered a courteous but neutral smile. "Of course. May I see your profile ID?" Vanessa placed her finger on the scanner embedded in the counter. A soft chime confirmed her identity. Jared's screen blinked once, then stopped. His smile faltered. "Strange," he said. "This order isn't appearing on our dispatch feed." He typed quickly, then shook his head. "It may have been flagged for manual review." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Why would a tea set require manual review? Jared hesitated, clearly trying to formulate a diplomatic answer. "That item is part of our elevated hospitality tier," he said slowly, "usually reserved for guests designated as V-level priority." Vanessa's eyes didn't flinch. "And who do you think the V stands for?" Jared blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, Vanessa Reed," she said, her voice now lined with steel. "I am the V-level. You're speaking to it." Silence lingered for a moment before Jared attempted to recover with a stammered, "Let me escalate this to the shift supervisor. Just a moment, please." But Vanessa had already turned away, walking back toward her booth with deliberate, unhurried steps. As she sat down, her phone vibrated on the table. She picked it up to find a push notification from Dominion's Member Services app. Lounge access, suspended profile flagged for inconsistent privilege use. Contact customer services. Her face didn't change, but the air around her did. The room hadn't gotten louder, but something fundamental had shifted, like the quiet click of a trap resetting. She tapped the alert and was immediately redirected to a static screen reading. "Access denied, re-authentication required." Her dashboard vanished. For a long second, Vanessa simply stared at the screen. Then she leaned forward, activated her alternate authentication, one that no one outside of corporate systems knew she possessed. The override sequence was one she'd built personally during her firm's infrastructure audit of Dominion's digital loyalty architecture, a firewall she insisted be installed as part of her equity conditions. Only 4 people on Earth knew that code existed. She was one of them. The app didn't respond. Access was frozen. She closed the screen and turned her gaze slowly across the room, eyes passing over the seated figures without stopping. Nothing outward had changed. The lights still glowed soft and warm. The music still whispered from unseen speakers. But she wasn't just invisible now. She had been disqualified. From across the lounge, she saw another staff member whisper something to a colleague while subtly glancing her way. The second staffer nodded, then discreetly tapped something into a handheld device. Vanessa watched without blinking. It was happening. The quiet revocation. Not the kind that was announced or emailed. The kind that came in stages. First, your preferences vanished. Then your services. Then your record. She opened her laptop, shifted her Wi-Fi source to her own encrypted hotspot, and began scrolling through Dominion's last public shareholder report. Her name, of course, wasn't mentioned, but her fund stake was. Equinox Capital, institutional co-lead in system-wide infrastructure modernization, including tiered loyalty management. She didn't need to see her name on the marble wall. She'd written the terms that allowed the lounge to exist. Another buzz on her phone. This time a text from her executive assistant, Matteo. Just received an alert from Dominion Tech Backend. They've locked your platinum access. Want me to activate path A or wait for your word? She replied with a single word, wait. This wasn't retaliation. It was observation, data collection. The waiter returned, not with her tea, but with a tightly pressed expression. MS. Read, I'm sorry to inform you that the tea set you requested is currently out of stock. She didn't move. Out of stock. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. We experienced a sudden shortage. There was a vendor delay. Vanessa said nothing. Just watched him. Watched how his hands didn't quite stop fidgeting. Would you like to substitute for the herbal blend instead? He asked. She nodded once, slow and precise. Sure. Surprise me. He retreated faster than he arrived. Back at her screen, she refreshed the system logs from her internal Equinox monitor. The loyalty engine Dominion used was still active, but her ID had been pushed into a neutral holding queue, a digital purgatory typically reserved for guests with lapsed payment disputes or flagged behavioral issues. Vanessa Reed had never missed a payment in her life. She had designed the compliance filters that flagged others. But now the system was eating its own architect. And the most ironic part, she could feel the programming behaving exactly as it was trained to. Bias in, bias out. It wasn't broken. It was functioning flawlessly. She leaned back in her seat, eyeing the time again. 8:46 a.m. Still early. Still gathering. She didn't need to force the confrontation. It was arriving on its own, wearing polite uniforms and holding silver trays. She raised her hand slightly. Another server approached. Yes, ma'am. Vanessa smiled thinly. Could you remind me who's managing the lounge this morning? That would be MS. Brielle Foster, he said. Would you like me to call her for you? Vanessa tapped her fingers lightly against the table. No. Let's give her a little longer to do exactly what she's already doing. Because soon it wouldn't be her knocking on their door. They would be knocking on hers. Vanessa remained seated, her posture composed, even as the weight of silent exclusion thickened around her. She sipped from a glass of lukewarm herbal tea that had been delivered 20 minutes late, devoid of the usual garnishes or even a coaster. The flavor was dull, the presentation careless, and yet she made no remark. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategic. She had been here before, not in this exact lounge, not with this exact staff, but in other rooms where discomfort was weaponized not with volume, but with implication. Just then, a low conversation caught her attention. It came from the right flank of the service desk, barely audible, but not far enough to escape her earshot. One of the floor managers, a woman in her mid-30s with a tight bun and clipboard tucked to her side, leaned in toward a younger attendant. Her voice was measured, but her words sliced through the background noise with clinical precision. R41 profile. History of escalation. She's been tagged in 2 lounges before. Let it run its course. Don't get involved. The younger employee nodded silently, eyes shifting toward Vanessa's booth. The implication landed exactly where it was intended to. Her presence was no longer simply a guest profile. It was a risk category. She wasn't just being managed. She was being documented. Vanessa kept her eyes on her tablet screen, though she registered every detail. The side glance, the posture of subtle avoidance, the way staff began rerouting around her booth as if it were suddenly radioactive. No one told her to leave. No one denied her presence. But the space around her was being manipulated to make that decision for her. She turned off her tablet, slipped it into her bag, and rose slowly, her every movement deliberate. She began walking toward the individual work pods, a semi-private section on the far side of the lounge, designed for clients needing focus and discretion. As she approached, 2 pods were visibly open, small glass enclosures equipped with ergonomic chairs, soft lighting, and most crucially, dual outlets for power and data. Vanessa stepped into one of the empty pods, set down her bag, and plugged in her charger. Nothing. No response. She tried the other outlet. Still nothing. She checked her adapter, her cord, the power switch. All functional. The outlets were simply dead. She stepped back out of the pod and flagged down a passing staff member. He was mid-20s, new enough to still be eager, old enough to carry a corporate tone. "Excuse me," Vanessa said. "The outlet in this pod isn't functioning. Could you check if the circuit's down?" The employee paused, then glanced toward the booth she had used. "Oh," he said, as if her location explained everything. "That pod's usually set aside for our regular VIPs." Vanessa tilted her head. "I'm sorry." He gave a tight, apologetic smile. "That particular pod isn't always active. We disable some ports for maintenance, or, depending on usage, sometimes we keep those reserved for familiar clients." His use of the word familiar lingered. Vanessa stared at him, not angry, just assessing. She gave a short nod and walked away without another word. She relocated to another pod. This one also had working lights, but the seat adjuster was jammed. Still, she made do. She connected to her hotspot again, opened a new window, and began writing a memo. Not to Dominion, not yet, but to herself. A time-stamped log of every micro-failure and maneuver she'd witnessed over the past hour. In her line of work, documentation was currency. And right now, she was getting rich. Behind her, two guests entered the pod across the row. Both male, both dressed in designer streetwear, both chatting loudly into headsets. Within seconds, a staff member entered and offered them power converters and an amenities guide, smiling broadly. Vanessa didn't need a comparison to understand the math. It was always the same equation, different variables, same output. Minutes later, a maintenance worker arrived and began inspecting the pod Vanessa had tried earlier. She watched him work, noting how quickly he replaced a working outlet with a new one, then immediately connected it to a backup supply. No ticket, no delay, just prompt response, triggered by someone else's comfort, not hers. Her phone buzzed again. This time, another message from Mateo. "Your name just dropped off Dominion's tier access log. Not downgraded, removed. Want me to call their legal or stay quiet?" Vanessa replied, still watching. "Give it 10. Across the room, the manager with the clipboard was now speaking to a third employee, gesturing subtly toward the pods. Vanessa noted how her hand moved, open palm, slow point, quiet whisper. The same choreography used by people trained to remove threats without confrontation. It wasn't about kicking someone out. It was about letting them expire inside the room. Vanessa closed her laptop. She knew the next move. They'd keep peeling back layers, one access denial at a time, until the pressure of invisibility convinced her to walk herself out. A subtle alert appeared on the corner screen of her pod. Session ending 5 minutes remaining. A countdown initiated. Her reservation, it claimed, was set to expire. She hadn't made a reservation. Platinum Black access didn't require one. The countdown continued. She sat still, letting it tick. At minute 3, the lights inside her pod dimmed slightly. At minute 1, the chair's back support automatically reclined, forcing an awkward seating position. At 0, a soft chime played and the pod's door gently unlocked, signaling open access for the next guest. Vanessa stood, but she didn't leave the lounge. She stepped out of the pod and walked back toward the main lobby area. A few heads turned, not with recognition, but with curiosity, like watching a figure refuse to vanish when every subtle signal had urged her to. And just as she passed the reception counter again, the young receptionist, who had first greeted her, flinched slightly as Vanessa made eye contact. There was no hostility there, just discomfort. Guilt, maybe. But guilt meant nothing without consequences. Vanessa headed toward the private meeting rooms reserved for top-tier executive clients. The ones with biometric access, only 5 profiles could open. Her profile had once been one of them. She scanned her ID. Red light. Denied. She didn't look surprised. She just checked the time again. 9:03 a.m. 3 minutes early. And still waiting. Vanessa remained composed as the scanner's red light faded into indifference, denying her access to the executive meeting suite she had personally helped design 3 years prior during Dominion's lounge modernization phase. She let the moment pass without a flinch, turned away, and walked calmly back into the main seating area of the Skylux Lounge, eyes surveying the room not as a guest, but as a strategist studying a chessboard where the pieces were shifting without her consent. She took a seat at a quiet table near the central walkway, close enough to observe, but not so prominent as to draw unnecessary attention. As she reached for her glass of now-room temperature tea, a lounge attendant approached, holding a tray and moving with the efficiency of someone conditioned to disappear into the background. He reached for her empty glass with a quiet, neutral expression, but just before lifting it, he paused. "Excuse me," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure this was the correct glass for your tea set?" Vanessa looked up slowly. "Excuse me," she asked, not because she hadn't heard him, but because she wanted him to hear himself. The attendant shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, this glass is usually paired with the Elite Reserve set. Your order was logged as standard herbal, I believe. Some clients get particular about matching sets." There was no accusation in his tone, no harshness, but the sentence landed like a hairline crack in porcelain. Quiet, delicate, but spreading. Vanessa's lips parted into the faintest curve of a smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't choose the glass," she replied evenly. "Your team brought it to me." He nodded quickly, mumbling something about checking inventory logs, then backed away with the glass in hand, retreating as if he had walked into a space he didn't expect to exist. A woman of quiet power unwilling to accept elegant condescension as service. Vanessa returned to her tablet, scrolling through a live report on aviation fuel derivatives, pretending not to notice the ripple that had just passed through the lounge. But she felt it. One sentence had been enough to shift how others looked at her. A subtle questioning of class, of placement, of whether she truly belonged here, dressed as she was, sitting where she was, unaccompanied yet composed. It wasn't new. It was polished. That was what made it dangerous. Across the lounge, a group of 3 clients gathered by the espresso bar, speaking in hushed but animated tones. They were dressed in a blur of understated wealth, suede loafers, Italian knits, watches designed more for boardrooms than runways. One of them, a middle-aged man with silver hair and the quiet swagger of inherited money, noticed Vanessa rising from her seat and walking toward the private meeting rooms again. She didn't expect the room to let her in this time either, but she needed a quiet place to make a secure call. As she approached the frosted glass doors again, she heard it, a voice from behind, low but not quite quiet enough, drifting like a dagger wrapped in silk. "Thought she was with tech support," the man said with a short laugh. "Doesn't look like boardroom material." The words froze midair. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't mocking. He was just stating, as though observing something obvious, as though his observation were fact. Vanessa paused, her hand hovering near the biometric pad she now knew wouldn't recognize her. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She had heard this exact tone before, on trading floors, in elevator lobbies, even in investor briefings when someone assumed the woman in the room was the assistant, not the principal. She took a slow breath, lowered her hand, and instead turned to face the mirrored panel nearby, fixing her collar with the same grace she'd shown the last 100 times she'd been misjudged. Her reflection didn't reveal a crack, only steel wrapped in elegance. Behind her, the laughter faded, replaced by the clinking of cutlery and the dull hum of lounge music. The air smelled faintly of bergamot and sugar glaze, an intentional sensory trick designed to soften impatience, ease tension. But Vanessa's senses had sharpened. This room, once built for her tier of client, now worked to subtly erase her from it, one polite gesture at a time. She walked back to the central seating area and claimed a spot beside the tall indoor plant wall, where natural light filtered through tinted glass, casting soft golden lines across the leather seating. She placed her phone face down on the armrest and retrieved a printed dossier from her bag. Equinox Fund Performance Q1, Q3, Asset Mobility and Private Equity, ROI. She read without reading, her eyes scanning data while her mind cataloged behavior. Whose voice lowered when she passed, whose smile tightened, who offered help, who withheld it. A new staff member approached, this one male, perhaps in his 40s, with a confident air of someone recently promoted and determined to display it. "MS. Read?" he asked, already holding a tablet. We just wanted to check if your stay has been satisfactory so far. His tone was official, borderline scripted. Vanessa nodded once. It's been informative. The man chuckled politely, not quite understanding her word choice, and glanced at the tablet again. If there's anything you'd like adjusted, do let us know. We strive to offer an experience tailored to every guest tier. Tier, she echoed, letting the word hang. And what tier am I exactly? The man hesitated. You're registered as a general platinum level client. That's odd, she replied, voice still calm. Because I've been platinum black since this program's inception. My firm helped write the tiering algorithm. I even wrote part of the language in your membership charter. His smile faltered. He tapped rapidly on his screen, then muttered, Strange, the backend must have updated. I'll check with IT. Vanessa leaned in slightly. I'm sure you will. She dismissed him with a nod and watched him disappear behind the opaque service wall, shoulders suddenly tenser. Another crack. Another note. Another data point. Her phone vibrated again. Mateo. Dominion just issued an internal reclassification for your profile. No notification sent. Looks like someone's flagging you manually. Vanessa didn't reply. Not yet. She was still collecting. Still letting the room write its own report. One polite insult at a time. Vanessa remained in her seat beside the tall greenery wall, the performance report now closed in her lap, one hand resting lightly on the leather binder, while the other idly tapped the edge of her phone. The lounge had returned to its calculated quiet, the soft rustle of newspapers, the delicate clinking of porcelain cups, and the occasional low murmur of travelers wrapped in their own curated silences. Yet beneath that surface, she could feel it pulsing, an undercurrent of engineered discomfort, an algorithm of exclusion operating invisibly, silently, effectively. She wasn't looking for confrontation. She was looking for consistency, for the next predictable move in a system that believed it could erase someone like her, without leaving fingerprints. It didn't take long. Her tablet, still resting on the side table next to her seat, lit up suddenly. A system-wide sync initiated between the Dominion Air Lounge interface and her user account, something that typically only occurred during concierge-triggered service refresh cycles. She leaned in and tapped the screen, curious to see what the system had decided to change on her behalf. What popped up instead was a full-screen red warning banner, stark against the lounge's neutral design scheme. Access denied, account flagged. Behavior alert, code 33Z. Vanessa stared at it, her expression a blank canvas. She tapped the More Info prompt. A message appeared. This account has been temporarily suspended due to guest conduct inconsistencies. Please contact guest oversight for reactivation. She sat back slowly, the image burning into her memory. She'd written the internal review protocols for this app. She knew what 33Z meant. Not violence. Not threat. 33Z was a soft tag used for guests deemed uncooperative, entitled, or behaviorally disruptive in low-visibility incidents. In short, it was the digital version of being whispered about behind a closed door. Vanessa picked up her phone, screenshotted the warning, and forwarded it to Mateo with a single note. It's active. Keep logging. Then she locked her screen and looked up, just in time to catch a supervisor approaching, flanked by 2 staff members and holding a digital clipboard. The supervisor, Brielle Foster, if her badge still matched the internal staff database Vanessa had helped fund, wore a tight smile and a practiced calm. MS. Reed, she began, stopping a respectful distance away. Do you have a moment to speak with us privately? Vanessa nodded slightly. Speak here. Brielle hesitated, then motioned toward a quieter section near the fountain installation. It may be more comfortable over there. Vanessa didn't move. I'm comfortable now. Brielle exchanged a glance with one of her colleagues before stepping forward. There was a small incident earlier, she said carefully. A guest reported that you were speaking on the phone at volume that disrupted the experience in the quiet zone. Vanessa's eyebrows barely lifted. I was on a call using noise-canceling earbuds. I didn't speak above conversational volume. Brielle nodded sympathetically. Of course, and we understand that. However, to maintain neutrality, We're required to log any complaints through the behavior system. It seems that in the process, your profile was flagged under 33Z. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. So let me get this straight. A single anonymous guest can report me, and without verification, the system downgrades my access. Brielle didn't answer directly. We don't control the automation, but we are required to follow protocol once a flag is registered. Vanessa looked down at the screen again, then back at the team in front of her. Is this protocol applied evenly? She asked. Do you check noise levels when men take business calls on speaker in the bar area? No one answered. Brielle cleared her throat. We'd like to ask as a courtesy, if you'd be willing to sign an acknowledgement confirming your awareness of the code and your agreement to maintain silence during the remainder of your stay. She extended the clipboard forward. On the screen, a digital form blinked under the headline, Guest Conduct Confirmation Form. Vanessa read the first few lines. It wasn't just a waiver, it was a behavioral strike, a record. Signing it would put her under elevated watch across all Dominion lounges globally. She looked at Brielle. And if I refuse? Brielle's tone remained pleasant. Then we'll be required to offer you alternative waiting accommodations outside the lounge for the remainder of your visit. Vanessa considered the clipboard, then looked around the lounge. A few guests were now watching discreetly. One was even filming with their phone angled behind a coffee cup. The audience had arrived. Dominion knew exactly what it was doing. No raised voices, no threats, just quiet humiliation, processed through workflow automation. She took the clipboard, tapped the scroll arrow down to the bottom, then stopped at the signature field. She stared at it for 3 long seconds. Then she handed it back, unsigned. If you're going to remove me, she said softly, you'll do it without my cooperation. Brielle's mouth tightened just enough to reveal discomfort, but she nodded and said, of course. I'll notify the transition desk to assist with your exit. She turned and walked away briskly, while the other 2 staff members remained momentarily frozen, unsure whether to escort Vanessa or apologize. She didn't look at them. She just picked up her tablet, packed it slowly into her bag, and stood up. Not to leave, but to move. She walked toward the barista station, not because she needed coffee, but because it gave her a full view of the lounge's control kiosk, where staff queued digital instructions for system changes. She stood in line, pulled out her phone again, and opened the live feed Mateo had synced from back-end tracking. Her profile now carried 3 flags: alert, uncooperative conduct, priority hold removed, lounge access under internal review. They hadn't accused her of anything criminal. They didn't need to. They had simply written a new story about her inside the system, one that would now follow her from terminal to terminal, masked under codes, hidden behind guest satisfaction metrics. And that's when the final ping came. Not from Dominion, from the fund's internal AI monitor. It showed that her digital identity had been soft blacklisted inside the Dominion Partner Network. No alarms, no sirens, just silence weaponized as policy. Vanessa remained at the edge of the barista station, eyes fixed on the lounge's service terminal just beyond the plexiglass divider, where the system's heartbeat throbbed through quiet commands and back-end automation. Her profile, once a beacon of elite access, now sat exiled behind firewall walls of silence, tagged, flagged, and silently erased with each passing minute. She inhaled once, slowly, her shoulders squared not in resistance, but in readiness. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to explain. She had watched long enough. The data was there, invisible to everyone in the lounge but her, and it was time to shift the balance of power from observation to execution. With a single swipe of her thumb, she unlocked the secondary interface on her phone, a dark-themed app cloaked behind the icon of a generic calendar. To the average onlooker, it looked like any productivity tool. But inside, it held the root control panel of Equinox Capital's contingency protocols, codenamed Mercury Cloud. A secure architecture built to manage real-time investment reactivity across high-risk infrastructure assets, including hospitality, transport, and digital service providers. Dominion Air Holdings sat squarely on that list. Vanessa navigated through 3 levels of biometric verification, pausing only briefly before the final prompt. A line of soft gray text blinked at the bottom of the interface. Execute freeze protocol? Target. Dominion Air Holdings, all active channels duration. Indefinite. She pressed her thumb to the scanner, then tapped one word. Confirm. No alarms went off. No dramatic shifts in lighting or security lockdowns. The moment passed as any other would, unnoticed by the room, but seismic beneath the surface. Within 30 seconds, back-end processes tied to Dominion's liquidity access began to halt. Transactional pipelines into their loyalty management vendors slowed. Digital concierge systems queued commands but failed to execute. Lounge control terminals began flickering, hesitating between transitions. Vanessa placed her phone screen down on the marble countertop and accepted a lukewarm espresso shot from the barista with a faint nod of thanks. She didn't need to tell anyone what had happened. She simply watched. Exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds after her command was sent, the first system-wide announcement cut through the lounge's ambient music with a faint chime and a disembodied voice. Attention valued guests. We are currently experiencing a temporary system disruption affecting select services. Some amenities may be unavailable while we resolve the issue. We appreciate your patience. Vanessa smiled, small and unreadable. To most, it sounded like routine maintenance. But for those behind the scenes, especially Dominion's operations staff, it was something far more urgent. The message replayed twice, then disappeared. But the effects didn't. The touch order kiosks blinked erratically. A family near the corner booth tried to adjust their seat warmer and got an error message instead. The Teen Fusion station shut down mid-service, spilling lukewarm water onto the tray. Digital screens that once displayed boarding alerts now flickered back to the Dominion logo, frozen in loop. Brielle Foster reappeared near the front desk, her jaw tight as she whispered into her earpiece. The polished calm she had wielded so efficiently earlier, now visibly strained. She glanced toward Vanessa once, just once, and Vanessa met her gaze without a hint of urgency. If Brielle had any idea what had just occurred, she didn't show it. Not yet. But the edges of her confidence were already fraying. Back near the high-backed leather seats, a group of business travelers began tapping impatiently at the lounge app, trying to log into their premium meal orders, only to receive a uniform message. Service temporarily unavailable. Please see concierge. The concierge, meanwhile, had already begun fielding a line of confused inquiries from guests wondering why nothing was working. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. Mateo. Freeze confirmed. Financial services loop suspended. Loyalty API timed out. Estimated full disruption in under 90 seconds. She replied with a single word. Monitor. She rose from her seat, espresso finished, and walked slowly past the central digital info wall. She noticed one of the terminals had gone dark entirely, showing only a recovery screen and a blinking cursor. 2 tech staff hovered nearby, clearly unsettled, whispering frantically and rebooting the same system for the 3rd time. One of them pulled out his phone and snapped a picture, likely to forward to central IT. The weight of control had shifted. Quietly, without ceremony, across the room, the man who had joked earlier about Vanessa looking like tech support now stood visibly annoyed, trying to reset his own digital locker panel without success. He waved down a staff member, who offered him a glass of room temperature water and a printed pamphlet as a placeholder for the inoperative system. Vanessa walked past them, not stopping. She didn't need to. The room was already reacting. She passed the reception desk again. This time, the young blonde woman who had originally challenged her presence avoided eye contact altogether, her focus now squarely on the blinking console in front of her. It displayed the word system retry, connection unstable. She bit her lip, typed something, and quietly reached for the landline, one of the few analog tools left in the increasingly digital lounge. Vanessa's footsteps were soft against the marble, deliberate but unhurried, as she returned to her previous seat, gathered her belongings, and settled into a position with full view of the room. The energy had changed, not just in technical terms, but in tone. Staff were moving faster now, voices lower, more clipped. Executives were being called. Guests were getting restless. But no one knew why the system was failing. And certainly, no one suspected that the woman they tried to politely erase had her hands on the very wires that powered the space around them. She leaned back in her seat, retrieved a second device from her bag, a narrow black touchscreen slate with no logos and no ports. It was a satellite link key, one of only 3 issued to her fund's partners for high-level response protocols. She hadn't used it in nearly 7 months. She tapped in a code, then waited. A soft green glow confirmed uplink. She activated the secure line, voice only. Status, she said. A woman's voice on the other end replied instantly. System instability confirmed across all 4 Skylux lounges connected to Dominion's tiernet. Client control servers are stalling. Do you want to initiate full audit visibility? Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted to the room once more. The line at the concierge desk had grown. The barista had stopped serving and was now trying to reboot the coffee terminal. Screens flickered in loops. She leaned in closer to the mic and whispered the next command. Vanessa remained leaned forward, her voice calm as she gave the next command into the secure satellite relay, not louder than a whisper, but injected with unmistakable finality. Initiate full audit visibility. Authorization code VRX97. A pause, then a soft chime confirmed the execution, followed by the voice on the line. Audit broadcast unlocked. System-wide admin trace will deploy across all Dominion terminals in 90 seconds. Vanessa ended the call and slipped the device back into the side pouch of her briefcase, her eyes rising just as the front desk erupted into low chaos. The lead receptionist, now visibly flustered, held her earpiece tightly, speaking in short, clipped sentences while trying to reboot her panel again. Her screen had gone fully black, not frozen this time, but powered down entirely by the blackout protocol Vanessa had just triggered. The air was shifting. It wasn't just the malfunctioning devices or the nervous glances anymore. There was an unease now, crawling beneath every polished surface, an awareness that something beyond their comprehension had begun. It wasn't just a glitch. Something bigger was unraveling, and it had a name. It arrived in the form of rapid footsteps and a slammed glass door. A senior Dominion manager, tan blazer, red face, hair slightly undone, burst into the lounge holding a stack of documents, his face pale as if he had just read his own obituary. The paper in his trembling hands bore the unmistakable markings of an international fax, the Dominion Zurich header clearly stamped in the top corner, redacted sections still bleeding through the translucent ink. He didn't walk to the reception desk. He made a beeline for Vanessa. MS. Read? He asked breathlessly, his voice louder than he intended. He stopped, catching his breath, then started again. We just received direct confirmation from Zurich Command. You're Vanessa Reed of Equinox. His eyes flicked down at the top page again, as if needing to double-check what he already knew. You're listed as our strategic funding partner for the Skylux expansion. Your firm controls 48% of our North American capital structure. The words hit the room like an invisible bell. Everything stilled. Staff froze mid-task. Guests stopped mid-sentence. A few heads turned, then a few more. No one said anything, but the silence was louder than outrage. Vanessa didn't move. She simply turned her head toward him, one eyebrow raised. That's correct, she said. I see your system works faster when your bank balance is at risk. The manager's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. There must have been a miscommunication, some kind of internal disconnect. We were never informed. You weren't informed, Vanessa interrupted coolly, because you weren't supposed to need a memo to show basic decency. But since that failed, I brought you a clearer message. She pulled her phone from her pocket, tapped into the Equinox internal tracker, and held it up to him. On screen, a live red timer, counting down from 3 minutes and 47 seconds, labeled Dominion Asset Lock Audit Broadcast Phase 2. The manager blanched. We can fix this, he said quickly, voice cracking. Please, allow us to restore your profile immediately. I'll escalate your account to corporate priority. We'll have the system reauthorize you in under 5 minutes. We'll grant you full access to the executive suite, the boardroom, private concierge. Whatever you need. Vanessa stood, slowly, gracefully, like a CEO rising from a deal she no longer needed to close. She adjusted her blazer, then looked toward the executive wing, where the doors had earlier refused her entry. "You want to reopen the doors now?" she asked, tone almost casual. "You don't have to. I've already changed the locks." The manager stared, uncertain if she was speaking metaphorically or literally, and somehow knowing both could be true. Vanessa turned her back on him without another word and began walking through the lounge again. But this time, the room parted for her, not from courtesy, but consequence. She passed the same leather chairs that had earlier been denied her comfort, the same bar where whispers about her had turned to jokes. No one laughed now. No one dared. At the far side of the lounge, a cluster of mid-level Dominion staff gathered around a locked console, where a red screen now blinked with a system override message. Access revoked, external control detected. Contact primary financial administrator. One of the attendants whispered something to a colleague, pointing toward Vanessa as she walked past. "That's her," he said, voice tight. "That's the one who shut us down." The entire Dominion executive tree, from Zurich to the U.S. East Coast, had just learned that their systems weren't owned. They were leased. And the landlord had just walked in. Vanessa made her way back to her original booth, now strangely untouched and freshly reset by staff who had finally figured out which name not to ignore. A bottle of sparkling water, a fresh glass, and a folded linen napkin had been placed at the table. She didn't sit. She picked up the napkin, inspected it, and set it back down like a judge examining a piece of staged evidence. Behind her, the Dominion manager cleared his throat nervously. Would you like us to prepare the executive boardroom now?" She turned halfway, gaze precise. "You prepared the wrong room," she replied. "What you need now isn't a boardroom. It's a tribunal." A junior associate ran into the lounge with a portable console in hand, speaking into a headset with Zurich headquarters. Yes, we understand. We're tracing the breach now." "No, it's not a breach. It's a lockout protocol from the inside. We're confirming the legal pathway." His voice trembled as he added, "The audit file wasn't a bluff. We have 3 red flags across onboarding, bias tracking, and system escalation procedures. It's all time-stamped." Vanessa reached into her bag and retrieved a silver folder, the kind not sent by email, not uploaded into a cloud, but hand-carried across terminals and only opened in the presence of attorneys or decision-makers. She handed it to the same trembling manager. "In here you'll find a 78-page preliminary investigation into your company's pattern of coded discrimination, guest treatment data, flag history, incident replay logs, all pulled from your own systems before I was flagged." The manager took the file with shaking hands, barely holding it steady. I didn't know this was happening," he muttered. "You didn't want to," Vanessa answered. "That's why I did." He turned away, already calling someone on his headset, voice rising as the reality set in. Dominion was no longer in damage control. They were in freefall. Vanessa pulled out her second phone, opened a different app, this one bearing the logo of a compliance firm contracted by international aviation regulators, and began uploading the audit document into a secure channel. Not for vengeance, for transparency. She wasn't here to be let back in. She was here to make sure no one else was ever quietly pushed out again. The moment Vanessa's compliance report finished uploading into the secure aviation regulatory channel, a chain reaction began that no one inside Dominion's corporate tower had the clearance or the foresight to stop. Within 12 minutes, a ripple extended beyond the polished confines of the Skylux Lounge and out into the steel arteries of 4 major airports where Dominion Air maintained flagship VIP lounges: JFK, LAX, O'Hare, and DFW. At first, it appeared to be coincidence, alerts lighting up on internal screens, emails from compliance divisions in Zurich marked priority escalation, a sudden influx of system re-authentication requests pinging from secured administrative ports. But this wasn't a coincidence. It was an audit warhead disguised as a service update, triggered directly by Equinox Capital's Infrastructure Safeguard Clause, Section 4B, Line 6. In the event of discriminatory operational behavior within client-facing environments, all service structures under Equinox funding shall be subject to immediate audit and operational suspension. Dominion's own lawyers had signed it 18 months ago. They never expected it would be used. At JFK's Skylux terminal, the shift manager received a ping from HQ marked Priority Level 1 Freeze initiated. She stared at the screen in disbelief, then tapped into the live chat with Zurich Legal. The response was instant. Conduct audit requested. All personnel interaction logs for the past 90 days to be reviewed. Pause all active guest reviews. Cancel non-essential services. Await inspection team. At LAX, the general manager of operations locked eyes with his assistant as the same warning flashed on his screen. "What is this?" he asked. The assistant only had one answer. "It's the READ protocol." The term spread through internal staff channels like wildfire. READ protocol just activated at O'Hare. DFW team says Zurich is on a call with Homeland. Who the hell is Vanessa Reed? By hour's end, they would all know. Meanwhile, at Dominion's corporate headquarters in Manhattan, a boardroom full of analysts and investor relations officers scrambled to manage what was now being described as an optics implosion. Bloomberg Terminal flashed red across key IPO watch lists. 3 major institutional investors, Kellen Group, Axis Core, and Firepath Equity, announced the suspension of all upcoming commitments to Dominion's public offering scheduled for the next quarter. Firepath, a spokesperson, was first to release a formal statement. Due to concerns related to unresolved internal bias protocols and active regulatory inquiries into Dominion's passenger conduct ecosystem, we are retracting our $110 million support package pending full audit transparency. The reaction was immediate. Dominion's pre-IPO valuation, already fragile in a post-pandemic recovery climate, plummeted by 14% in after-hours trading, wiping over $400 million in expected capitalization off their books before market open. Financial Twitter exploded. It's not the tech that failed. It's the culture. Reed didn't bring them down. She held up a mirror. One tweet, posted by an anonymous insider, went viral within minutes. Dominion Lounge, where diversity is welcomed, as long as it's quiet, deferential, and never too confident. The hashtag silent explosion climbed to trending status within 45 minutes. Inside the lounge, Vanessa received the first alert confirming audit deployment across the 4 sister hubs. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply read the message and closed the screen. Power wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, about forcing silence to explain itself. She reached into her bag and pulled out her Equinox-issued tablet once more, this time navigating to the stakeholder portfolio tied to Dominion's vendor contracts, food service, housekeeping, biometric security. Then flag 5 for immediate temporary review. These were the systems that interfaced most closely with customers. These were the systems that had failed her. Across the room, Dominion executives were now arriving in waves, some pulled from nearby gates, others rushing in from neighboring terminals. The lead investor relations officer, a woman named Claudia with the demeanor of someone who usually answered questions with controlled optimism, now looked visibly shaken. She approached Vanessa's table with a tablet in hand, voice low but respectful. "MS. Reed," she began, "Zurich has requested a real-time video briefing with you and 3 board members. Would you be open to?" Vanessa held up a hand without looking at her. "I've already briefed Zurich. They don't need a second version. They need your resignation letters." Claudia blinked. "Mine." All 3 directors connected to guest services and system oversight. "You'll know which ones. Zurich will forward the list if you hesitate." The woman nodded, the blood draining from her face. She walked away with a stiff gait, already tapping into the internal HR chain. Vanessa turned her gaze to the media monitor mounted on the wall above the lounge bar. A new headline had appeared. Dominion Lounge accused of discrimination by executive stakeholder. Multiple terminals under audit. Below it, a split screen showed her profile photo. an image pulled from a 2022 TEDx talk she gave on ethical investment practices, next to a looping B-roll shot of the Dominion Lounge entrance. The image was professional, controlled, unshakable, just like her. At O'Hare, a staff member tried to delete a flagged complaint from a guest profile. The system blocked the action. Audit lock active, it said. Attempted redaction recorded. The staffer swore under her breath. At LAX, a guest relations manager found herself logged out of the loyalty override tool for the first time in her 6-year tenure. Her attempts to regain access redirected her to a blank screen with a simple message: re-evaluation pending. Dominion C-suite tried to get ahead of the fallout, scheduling a soft press briefing with preferred media outlets to frame the story as a misunderstanding with an esteemed client. But it was too late. Financial Digest published an exposé that same afternoon under the title, "The Lounge That Locked Out Its Landlord." It detailed the flagging system, the 33Z codes, the way digital tools were used to isolate certain passengers without leaving direct evidence. It named names. Back in the lounge, Vanessa received one final alert on her tablet. Zurich had authorized a full forensic sweep of Dominion's guest behavior coding language, effective immediately. Every code, every tag, every harmless classification, all would be reviewed under international anti-discrimination standards. She tapped once on the screen, locking the report. She had done what she came to do. And yet, the full collapse hadn't even started. Vanessa watched the final ripple of fallout unfold, not from a command center or conference room, but from the quiet corner of a private hotel suite overlooking the airfield, where her tablet streamed live coverage of the press briefing that Dominion Air had scrambled to assemble. The CEO, Bryce Hammond, stood behind a podium branded with the company's outdated tagline, "Elevate every journey." He looked exhausted, his suit impeccable, but his expression tight, like a man trying to steer a ship that had already struck reef. Behind him, Dominion's flag hung limp against a matte gray wall. Cameras clicked. Reporters waited. Hammond inhaled slowly and began, "We acknowledge the pain, the failures, and the systemic blind spots that led to the events of last week. Our guest, MS. Vanessa Reed, was not treated with the professionalism or respect owed to any traveler, let alone one who has helped build the infrastructure of modern hospitality as we know it. For that, we offer not excuses, but recognition and deep regret." He paused as a murmur passed through the room, but he pressed on. "Dominion is committed to conducting a full internal overhaul of our service protocols. We will dissolve all covert tagging systems and open our digital logs to third-party review. This is not about optics. This is about integrity. This is about listening." The statement was polished, almost genuine, but it came too late. Within minutes of the live stream going public, netizens dug into archival interviews, piecing together a clip from a shareholders forum recorded the year before. In it, the same man, relaxed, confident, surrounded by suits and applause, leaned into a microphone and quipped, "Look, at the end of the day, whoever's got the wallet, we roll out the carpet. That's how the world works. If you want more than that, well, buy your own airline." The clip resurfaced with a vengeance. Within hours, it was remixed across platforms. One creator looped the soundbite over footage of Dominion staff ignoring Vanessa, with a caption that read, "Turns out she already owned your runway." Another overlaid the audio with flashing red flags from Dominion's internal system, ending on a screen capture of the Reed protocol activation timer. The message was clear. The age of unchecked courtesy was over. Systemic silence had been broken, not with noise, but with control. Not with protest signs, but with precision funding. Vanessa didn't call for cancellation. She executed compliance. And the public saw the difference. Dominion stock remained frozen for 3 trading days, awaiting investigation results. Zurich suspended 5 board members. At least 9 high-level managers were placed on indefinite leave. The IPO was shelved. Headlines turned Vanessa's name into a shorthand for silent reform. Reed response activated, read one op-ed. Dominion's fall isn't a fluke. It's the cost of mistaking access for entitlement. Vanessa didn't grant interviews. She issued no statements. Her power had never lived in the spotlight. It lived in the systems others took for granted. And it continued to move. 1 week later, she returned to the airport, not to reclaim status, but to check on progress. The terminal felt quieter this time. Not in volume, but in atmosphere. Something had shifted. People moved more intentionally. Staff made eye contact. The air of superiority had been replaced with caution, maybe even awareness. She walked past the familiar Dominion Skylux lounge without hesitation. The lights inside were still dimmed, staff retraining behind closed glass. A small sign hung at the entrance. Service temporarily suspended under review. Vanessa kept walking, past the duty-free, past the security checkpoint she no longer needed to clear. And then she saw it. On the left wing of the terminal, where an unused gallery had once displayed airline memorabilia, stood a new glass facade, tinted in soft bronze, its clean-line signage still bearing the glint of recent installation. Read Executive Lounge. Below the name, a simple subtext, no status required. Just respect. A hostess in slate gray greeted her at the door, smiling with practiced calm but unmistakable sincerity. "Welcome," she said, offering no clipboard, no scanner, no questioning glance. "Would you like still or sparkling?" Vanessa nodded once. "Still, with lemon." The hostess gestured inside. "Please, make yourself comfortable. Everything's been arranged." Vanessa stepped through the threshold. The space was bright, balanced, designed with intention. A blend of quiet luxury and access. Private nooks stood beside open workspace. No velvet ropes. No ranking tiers. Just environment. A young man in a navy blazer approached with a sleek tablet. "MS. Reed," he said, "our design team wanted you to know. The lounge architecture was modeled after your original equity proposal to Equinox in 2020. We made sure every material, every vendor, and every policy was aligned with your principles. Would you like to see the data dashboard?" Vanessa shook her head. "Not today." She took a seat by the window. No reservation, no profile scan, just presence. Behind her, a screen looped a quiet message, playing without volume. This lounge was built for travelers who were told to wait. Now, they don't have to ask. She looked out at the runway, a jet ascending slowly into the haze of late morning sky. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't documenting. She wasn't defending. She wasn't dismantling anything. She was simply home. If this story moved you or made you think differently about power, respect, or silence, don't just scroll. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the systems we take for granted and spotlight the ones rewriting the rules. What moment hit you the hardest? Was there a line, a twist, or a look that stayed with you? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop your thoughts and location in the comments. We read every one.